Good evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video is going to be the first in a series of videos, the fiction behind my gaming. So this is my personal Appendix N, and I'm going to begin with my Robert E. Howard paperback novels. So around the same time that I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, I started playing somewhere around maybe 1977, 1978, and immediately shifted over from D&D to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in 79 or early 1980. I started reading Robert E. Howard novels, and I've often tried to remember which actually came first, or maybe they happened around the same time. And as I was going through my my older collection of novels, because whereas I don't have the same games that I had back in the late 70s, early 80s, I had to replace them all over time. My soft cover or my paperback novels I've had since then. So the first book I'm going to show you is the one that kind of gives that that experience in a time context. And so I am going to begin with Robert E. Howard's The Sours of Thunder. All right, so and I'll show what establishes the time frame for this book. So here it's kind of a weird distortion of the shape of the book, obviously, because it's a standard paperback novel, but you will be able to at least see things clearly in here. So as you can see, at the time, I bought this book for $4.25, and I bought this book at Metamorphosis Books, 83 Middle Road, Sayville, New York. And this book is dated 1975. Not that I bought it in 1975. I certainly didn't, but this bookstore, Metamorphosis Books. Metamorphosis was really a small shop that was more so a seller of those crystal things and pet rocks and that kind of like a mystical type store. So incense and things like that. And this was around the corner from our dungeon master's home. Shayana was our dungeon master, and he was the person who introduced us to Dungeons and Dragons. So this bookstore was probably about 2.5 or 3 miles away from my home, and it was on the way towards his house. And we used to walk there after school throughout 1978, 79, or possibly 77. And it wasn't until we shifted to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons that our friend Adam took over being a dungeon master, and he lived up the block from me. So it certainly shortened our our walking distance, and actually passed it on to Shayna. Our friend Steve lived right across the street from me as well. So, we were a group of 4, and then we picked up a 5th player once in a while, David Chan being one of our other more common members to our group, and he lived kind of halfway in between Shayana and ourselves. So this is probably the first book that I picked up of Robert E. Howard's, and started reading this and then saw that this is the first time in paperback and the author of Conan, and that's when I started picking up Conan as well. So although I didn't get the novels of Conan until a bit later, but let me just show you a little bit in here. So the Zebra books, so it lists the Zebra books by Robert E. Howard, and that was the Sowers of Thunder, Tigers of the Sea, Worms of the Earth, A Gent from Bear Creek and the Vultures, The Incredible Adventures of Dennis Dorgan, Cormac McArt, Sword of the Gale, and this particular book has 4 stories in it. So it has The Lion of Tiberias, The Sowers of the Thunder, Lord Samarkand, and The Shadow of the Vulture. So these weren't Conan stories. These were stories that were kind of like historical fictions. They were set in. They were usually set in during the time of the Roman Empire, and these were adventures into the Middle East. It's been Jerusalem and in around that. So around the time of the, pre-Crusades, absolutely, we're going back to probably the latter portion of the Roman Empire that a lot of these stories have, are being set into. It has been decades upon decades since I have last actually read this book and gone through this book. So it's literally been sitting on my bookshelf for probably 40 plus years. So that's the first one. But the ones that really got me into it, and I will shift views here now, the books that were true inspiration for me were the Conan books. And at the time, the Conan books that I made sure that I got my hands on as they were being released, and these started to come out in 1984. So I bought them. So I started buying them, and I bought all 12 of them. And this is the Frazetta book cover. So that's how you know this particular series. And this particular series is the Ace book, so Ace Fantasy. And we have Conan. And they're a combination of stories written by Robert E. Howard, or stories that were completed by Elsbrog de Camp and Lynn Carter. So almost every story here has a portion of it or the entirety written by Robert E. Howard, and then the remainder are just filling in the fragments of his story. So here, and I will shift views once again. So here we have the Hiborian Age, which is, really does establish the setting that that these books take place in, or the Conan stories take place in. And it's really important to understand that the world setting for Conan the Barbarian is our own real world. It's the time period that his setting actually is, and so it's the fictional time period between the fall of Atlantis and the rise of the known world as we know it. And so here we have the stories written by Robert E. Howard. The first one is the Hiborian Age. Then The Thing in the Crypt is by Carter and DeCamp. The Tower of the Elephant is Howard. The Hall of the Dead is Howard and DeCamp. The God in the Bowl is Howard. Rogues in the House is Howard. The Hand of Nurgle is Howard and Carter. And The City of Skulls is Carter and DeCamp. Again, where it, is exclusively Howard, it tells you. Where it's Howard and either DeCamp or Howard and Carter, it notifies you. And then Carter and DeCamp still, I believe, had the fragments of Howard, but these might have been just short excerpts. and then they move on to they will move on to completing the remainder of the story. Here you have a map that's found in every one of this series of books, and it goes right into the introduction and such. So there we have, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these because there are 12, but I will just go through the books themselves. So once again, book number 1, and that is Thak the Beast Man on the front cover of this. Again, Frazetta, so you know these from that. Here is number 2, and that is with the frost giants that Conan is fighting. All right, and this as well has a number of stories. So the Curse of the Monolith, which is DeCamp and Carter. The Bloodstained God, which is Howard and DeCamp. The Frost Giant's Daughter, which is Howard. The Lair of the Ice Worm, which is DeCamp and Carter. The Queen of the Black Coast, which is Howard. The Vale of Lost Women, Howard. The Castle of Terror, which is DeCamp and Carter. And The Snout in the Dark, which is Howard, DeCamp, and Carter. All right, and The Snout in the Dark is a really well-known one, as is The Frost Giant's Daughter. The Frost Giant's Daughter is probably one of Conan the Barbarian's most famous of stories, but that has a lot to do with the painting by Elsbrog de Camp. By Frank Frazetta. The painting of Frazetta that really makes that stand out. We then go to Conan the Freebooter. So this is going to have, I'm sure, Queen of the Black Coast, and actually it doesn't. All right, so this has Hawks over Shem, the Black Colossus, Shadow in the Moonlight, the Road of Eagles, and A Witch Shall Be Born. And these are kind of following different time periods in Conan's life, but as he's moving throughout the Hiborian Age and throughout the world, and so there were different places at different times where he is set at. Robert E. Howard didn't write Conan's stories in a chronological order. They were kind of told like from the perspective of telling a fireside story about this, very grandiose, adventurer. And they didn't need to be told in a chronological order, and they weren't always put out in the books that way as well. But I think in this series they really tried to a certain extent, just kind of follow his career as he moved throughout the Hiborian Age, and they then continue to number 4, The Wanderer. And let's see. Here we have Black Tears, Shadows in Sambula, The Devil in Iron, and The Flame Knife. I believe this is from The Devil in Iron, this particular picture. We then go to Conan, number 5, Conan the Adventurer. And let's see, we have The People of the Black Circle, The Slithering Shadow, Drums of Tambulka, and The Pool of the Black One. All right. Once again, this is during his Buccaneer years again, in the northern parts of the Hiborian world, along that coastline and such. I believe he was with the Barasha pirates at that time. Then we go to the Buccaneer. And here, where an old Singaran custom, A Knife in the Dark, Death of the Sea Queen, The Nameless Island, or Isle, At World's Edge, Flame's Eyes, The Toad Thing, Cobra Crown, Wind in the Rigging, The Black Coast, Web of Doom, City of the Warrior Women, Queen of the Amazons, Under the Lash, The Black Labyrinth, The Devouring Tree, The Wreck of the Wastrel. The Wastrel was Conan's ship. A Kingdom in Balance, King Tothamon, and The Red Blood and Cold Steel. So this book here brings the introduction of his arch nemesis, Dothamon. From the movie, you'll probably familiar with Thulsa Doom. Well, in the books, it was Dothamon. Conan the Warrior, Book 7. And here we have Red Nails, Jewels of Gwalar, and Beyond the Black River. So Red Nails is in like a jungle area, and obviously Jewels of Gwalar and Beyond the Black River are taking place in Pictland, so in the forested the forested region that is the land of the Picts. We have the Usurper, so this should be when Conan becomes king, or is just about to become king. Yeah, I believe it's when he becomes king, because we have the Treasure of Tranikos, Wolves Beyond the Border, the Phoenix on the Sword, and the Scarlet Citadel. Okay. Conan the Conqueror, so he becomes king in here. And this is a novelette, so the whole thing is just one story. So Conan the Conqueror is a complete novel. And there's two such books that are written that way, at least. The Hour of the Dragon and Conan the Conqueror are both self-contained novels. So here we have the Return of Conan. So this is all, so the Avenger, the Return of Conan, and this introduces Bjorn Nyberg as one of the additional authors working along with the written works of Robert E. Howard. Conan of Aquilonia, and let's see, this has The Witch and the Mist, Black Sphinx of Nepthu, The Red Moon of Zimbabwe, and The Shadows in the Skull. And finally, Conan of the Isles. And here we should have, let's see, Red Shadows, The Black Hearts of Gomoria. Let's see if anything really sticks out as a major story. Nothing really stands out to me as being one of the ones that I recall immediately from the Conan comics or Savage Sword of Conan or anything. But I wanted to show you some of the other books that I have in my collection of Robert E. Howard paperbacks. So a lot of these are older than the Conan stories in some cases, but I have Three-Bladed Doom, and this particular book, let's see. Now there'll be some duplicates of short stories throughout some of these. Knives in the Dark. Let's see. Well, it doesn't actually have a table of contents that says what the stories are in here. Let's see when this came out. So this came out in 79, the Ace edition. Second printing was in 87. So I probably picked this up in 87 or so. So we have that. We have, I have Almeric, which is another character of Robert E. Howard's. And let's see. This book came out in 75. So 75, it's not, although this particular one is 77. So I probably got this at that same bookstore, but I'm not quite sure. We have the Skullface. So Skullface, if I recall, is Solomon Kane's story. Skullface, the Lord of the Dead, Names in the Black Book, and can't say the word, Manor. It's been so long since I've read some of these that, be a good idea to go back and read these again, just to check them out. Or see if I have them in some of my other books. There was a series of Del Rey larger volumes that were put out that I will do in a second series of Robert E. Howard books. I'm just showing off the the paperbacks that I have. So here is Worms of the Earth. And this is a Bran McMorn storyline here, or he's the main character. The Lost Race, Men in Shadows, Kings of the Night, A Song of the Race, Worms of the Earth, A Fragment, and The Dark Man. And this has some elements of like a eldritch horror kind of tied into him. Not quite Call of Cthulhu-esque, but Worms of the Earth has that really mind-shattering idea that there is a proto-race before man, a pygmy race that lived in the northern regions of Europe and in parts of what would become the United Kingdom and so Scotland and such, so or amongst the Celts and what would be called the Pict lands at the time as well. So it was like a proto-history before. So these would have been the tribes that existed before the fall of Atlantis. And the Road of Azrael. So here we go, another historical fiction. And this is set up a Hawks over Egypt, the Track of Beomund, Gates of an Empire, the Road of Azrael, and the Way of the Swords. And again, different characters, not Conan or Solomon Kane, but some of the other historical works that he had written. We have, I wish I would save that one for last of this stack here. We have the Swords of Shahrazar. So this is probably Elbarak, one of his other characters here. The Treasury of Tartary, the Swords of Shahar, the Curse of the Crimson God, the Brazen Peacock, and the Black Bear Bites. And again, it's been so long since I've read some of these that I'm a little bit unsure as to the exact characters that they have or whatever. Sometimes when you collect books for as long as I have, and when you've read many of these works in different formats, and I have a lot of them on audio as well, you kind of lose track of what fragments or what short stories Howard wrote completely on his own, or where he had collaborators, or where there were other authors that kind of finished off his tales. And sometimes you lose track of what characters were actually involved in them as well. So we have Sword Woman, and so this is Dark Agnes, and so one of the instances of Robert E. Howard writing specifically with a female character, so it wasn't just Red Sonja, which he really didn't write anything much. Red Sonja was kind of built off this character here. So he did write about female adventurers and strong female characters. And Sword Woman is one of the first and probably the most. I mean, between Dark Agnes, and then you had Belit, Queen of the Black Coast, and you had Valeria of the Scarlet Brotherhood. Robert E. Howard wrote strong female characters. So there's another there. So he wrote some westerns as well. So Heroes of Bear Creek. So this contains all three, I believe, three of the novels that were the Breckenridge Elkins character novels. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure how they break it down here. When did I pick up this book? This book is pretty old, but probably in the 80s that I picked this up. Yeah, so I would say this was 83 when I picked this up. So I've had this book since 1983. Never had this on audio. That's something I really should get. And then here is Robert E. Howard's, contributions or the use of the Cthulhu mythos. And so if you might be aware that that Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft were contemporaries. They wrote back and forth amongst each other, very, very often. They both collaborated. They both borrowed from each other. And, and they had as short as Robert E. Howard's life was, they did have a very productive friendship in the fact that they were corresponding with one another, via mail. So it took a lot longer to actually correspond with each other. But this was Robert E. Howard's dig into the Cthulhu mythos. So Arkham, he wrote The Black Stone, The Fire of Ashurbanipal, The Thing on the Roof, Dig Me No Grave, Silence Falls on Mecca Walls, The Valley of the Worm, which he took from one of his other stories. Like I said, that had a Worms of the Earth as well, that had a mythos type, a Cthulhu mythos type connection to it. Pigeons from Hell, which is a fantastic horror story. I mean, that is probably his best, and that is reproduced in graphic novels. That is just absolutely phenomenal. That's a must read and must own if you're into graphic novels as well, which I do have. I'll have to break that out and show you that as well. But really cool stuff. Finally, as you can see, I have quite a bit. And this is just my small paperbacks. So I have, who is this? So this is Bane Books, and they came out with a number of series of books. So this is volumes 1 through 7. And so the first one was Cormac McArt. The second book was a series of cult stories. The third, Solomon Kane stories. The fourth, Bran McMorn. All right. Eons of the Night, which was a mixture of characters. Let's see what stories we have in here. So let's see. Let's see. We have The House of Arabu, The Garden of Fear, The Twilight of the Grey Gods, Spear and Fang, Delenda Est, Marches of Valhalla. That's in another book as well. The Sea Curse. That's a graphic novel as well. Out of the Deep, The Forest of Velifair, and Wolf's Head. Let's see. So Tales in Darkness, American Adventures. So this is kind of like some of his westerns tied in with like a Call of Cthulhu kind of mix to it, or where you have western adventures going into other parts of the world, just particularly the Middle East or Africa. So very cool stuff. I'll show that here. And finally, Beyond the Borders. And this is going to be mostly Pickland, I believe. No, it looks like it's a mixture of several people of the Black Coast. It's a mix of Beyond, but mixture of characters and adventures. So that is pretty much, let's move back over here. So that's pretty much my collection of Robert E. Howard paperbacks. I do have a number of soft cover books that which I will cover during my in episodes 2, and then I have my hardcovers, which will certainly be episode 3 or possibly even episodes 3 and 4 because I have so much. I also have some very old pamphlet type booklets that that I have that are first printings, and I will probably deal with those in between the hardcovers that I have and and the next series of trade paperback soft covers that I have. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions about anything that I specifically had shown, like I said, I've seen and read these stories so many times over 4 decades, maybe even 4.5, maybe over 45 years since I've been reading these books. I've listened to them on audio. I've read them in different formats and everything. So if you have any specific question about any of the particular books that I put out here, I keep them right behind me now. So if you leave something in there in the comments and said, hey, tell me a little bit more about the Road of Azrael, and then I will pull out that book, give it a real quick skim through, and then I'll come back with a follow-up video on any of these individual books that you'd like for me to dig a little deeper into. So how do these work their way into gaming? Well, quite simply, you can take any of these stories or story fragments, and you can create scenarios or even whole adventures using these as the backbone for the adventure that you're looking to tell. And it's not tied to any particular system, so you can use old school D&D, you can use advanced Dungeons and Dragons, you could use a more modern version of Dungeons and Dragons, you could use basic fantasy, you could use Lamentations of the Flame Princess, you could use whatever you want. You can even convert some of them and use them with Call of Cthulhu, let's say. So anything that is kind of a low fantasy, because that's what Robert E. Howard really wrote. Not really big on magic, or if there is magic, it's more druidic, traditional sense of what magic was. Summoning. If there were magic users or sorcerers, they were extremely rare, extremely powerful, and nearly self-destructive in their thirst for knowledge. And so that's oftentimes what led to their downfall was a tremendous arrogance and and then just the belief that they were untouchable. And Conan being, whether it be Conan or Kull or Solomon Kane or what, none of his characters ever shied away from those great challenges. And so that's what allowed them to overcome was their lack of being hesitant to engage in something that was, under any normal circumstances with any normal human being, they wouldn't even attempt it. And his characters were so larger than life that, they were fearless, quite frankly, fearless in their pursuits of adventure. So again, many connections that you can make to a variety of different RPGs. Probably the closest for your Conans would be Modifius's Conan 2D20 system. But again, like I said, you can convert these to any low fantasy RPG that you wish to do, including Dungeons and Dragons, and you just strip out a lot of the magic that does exist in it, and it'll work there as well. If you're familiar, TSR released a Conan RPG, and they also released some movie adaptations for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons for the Conan movies that came out in the early 1980s. And so you have access to those as well, so you can kind of see what kind of a system they actually used for Conan and telling Conan stories for those as well. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this video. Enjoy the rest of your 4th of July weekend to the rest of my, American comrades out there who are, who may be celebrating the holiday weekend. I still intend to run my Tuesday night Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition game. I'm not quite sure about my Star Frontiers game, when we're actually going to start that off. Waiting to see if a few more players come on so that we can launch that. But certainly by next weekend, we are going to start our campaign, Star Frontiers, Alpha Dawn, and Nighthawks combined. And then once again, our AD&D First Edition campaign should be entering week 50 by next week. This upcoming Tuesday will be session 49, and then the following one will be session 50, or maybe it's 50 and 51. I'm not quite sure. I have to double check my notes. But anyway, thanks for joining. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a safe weekend for those of you that are going to be shooting off fireworks or, drinking. So be careful out there. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. Have a great afternoon.